Way too humble at times, biters be banking on it. Now I'm thinking on it when I cut on the beat and the verse starts feeling like a booster ever. I used to set off the cipher, now the hype is discreet. Praying I would give it up. Yeah, I'm into your wishes. Angels of sickness, and I can detect it without speech, hater. More flavors than some now later. Small country town, invader, profound, powerful innovator. Stay on the road like a Winnebago racing at Talladega. I major ollie traders like a scared of wood. How I'm doing, I'ma say I'm good, even if I wasn't. I never admit it. I'm seasoned and gifted and black. Every rap got apps getting you lifted. Classic poetry, picturesque with it, so vivid, homie, you know it's me. Who else sound like liquid gold and killer shows, repping for the indigos? Priestesses and practitioners, marathon finishers, jealous heart diminishes. You think I'm braggadocious with it cause you bogus. Get it only when it's given to you cause it ain't living through you.
Yes, and welcome to our Keep An Eye News. I am your combat reporter, Brother Tutmos Sankara, coming to you on all platforms. And today I want to bring a bit of clarity to my people. It's always so astounding how we get confused about the geopolitical scenarios that occur around the world. And so it is with Ukraine and Russia. You have to understand, you just have to read history. Number one, the first thing off the top is Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, is the spiritual heartland and center of the Rus people. European society is broken up into, as they like to say with us, right, tribes. And among these, you have in the British Isles, the Anglo-Saxons, which is a combination of the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes people, right? In France, you have the Franks and the Burgundians. In Spain, you have the Visigoths and Vandals. You have the heart of the Germanic people, which is Germany, in which all of Europeans, Western Europeans, consider themselves to be Germanic peoples. And so connected to that, next to that, having a history with that is what you would call another tribe, the Rus, and they were a bit different. The ones in Western Europe are phenotypically different. You'll often see the Eastern Europeans being of a more darker hair, and a little slighter, more swarthy pigmentation. And in this scenario, that Slavic, which it is properly phenotypically named, is recognized racially as separate from this Western European. Phenotypically, when you get into their arguments of racism amongst themselves, what they call each other, right? And so that's what they call them, Slavs, because they come from slaves, because they were among the first Europeans of that area to be enslaved. That's why they call them Slavs. And so these Slavic people have a chip on their shoulder against these Western European peoples. And yes, it's Europeans fighting each other, but you have to understand and make a decision geopolitically. This is the type of things where we make mistakes historically over time because we roll with the wrong folk. Stockholm syndrome, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, right? But here it is. We're sitting under Western imperialism, particularly in the United States, Western imperialism in general, particularly United States. And our people are arguing that what Putin is doing is not right. First, you don't know the history, right? The fight that Putin is carrying out is corollary to the fight that we in the Western diaspora are fighting to retain our homeland again. The heart of the Rus people is in Kiev, in Ukraine. And the Rus were tricked out of it by Western imperialism, right? In the meantime, since the fall of the Soviet Union, the economic effect on Africa has been astronomical. U.S. imperialism, Western imperialism has regained its footing after having been defeated in Vietnam and then Korea, and then coming up through the 70s and the independence of the African nations in the 2000s. It's seen this resurgence. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, AFRICOM actually having the audacity to set up a command to control our continent militarily, and ultimately toppling that most cogent, stable, influential, and prosperous nation in the north of Africa, Libya, is tearing it to pieces, taking out Gaddafi and killing him in the streets. After the fall of the USSR, this was geopolitically the events that occurred. So, coming up into 2020 and going up through the 2000s, from 2010, this particular geographical area, Putin saw the means and the subsistence to carry out a spiritual fight to regain the center of his homeland. That's all it is. Basically, if you know Russian history, and of course, let's take a little turn back through it. You notice when the Russians write their little handwriting, it ain't like it's not Latin script like the rest of the European languages. Alexander Pushkin, an African, gave them their language. And so it is almost a heroic, demonic type of language with these, figures, like almost drawing. See, some little, like the C with a letter, and then it'll be some stuff that ain't even no alphabet that we know of from the English alphabet. So that's a different script that goes to show you that's a different ethnography. If you could speak German, Italian, English, French, Spanish, and all of them using the same consonants and vowels, but these people, when they write their language, it ain't even none of them consonants and vowels, then that's a different people. You're speaking a different language. That's a different ethnicity. That's number one. So the fight in Ukraine is based upon that split in that ethnicity. Western European, the Germanics, and the Slavs over here, right? And the other Slavs are the Romanians, the Bulgarians, the Czechoslovakians, these people, dark-haired white folk over there, right? So our center and understanding of it has to be from the focus of the center of the key geopolitical understanding of, first of all, these European tribes, Slavs versus the Germanics. Got me? That's what we are. It's the Slavs versus Germanics. So if you rewind back to World War II so that you can understand, the fight between Hitler and Stalin by itself, not the rest of, not Japan in the Pacific, not in North Africa, that fight, not the fight in Western Europe, not the Normandy invasions, none of that. If you just count the fight between Russia and Germany on the Eastern Front, there's 28 million dead. 28 million. Big Tank Wars, the Battle of Kursk, the siege of Stalingrad, from 42 until the end, until about 44, when the Russians started to turn it back and it got to be winter, and then all the machines broke down, and the Russians were able to muster their planes to take over the air. They were able to defeat them and reroute them and turn the Germans back. So when you talk about a war, you talk about, and the Russians call it the Great Patriotic War. After this war, Ukraine, that area, the heart of Russia, was a part of the USSR. Right? Rightfully so. Correctly? Can we not say that in the Congo, where we say our people was born out of the mountains of the moon, they belong to us? That's the people where they said they sprouted out of the ground from. When you read all them crazy Russian fables and stuff, right? They say it came out the ground, right there in Kiev. All right. So that is the heart of the Rus people. That is their spiritual center that they got tricked out of by Western imperialism in 1991 with Gorbachev, right? So Putin, this guy, the strong man, out of the KGB, he's seeing that, being this patriot and rising up through the ranks of that society and that government. Now sees the time to seize this power. Him and China and them playing it off good. They playing it off good. They're like China, like, oh yeah, man, you shouldn't have did that. Keep on. I ain't got nothing to do with no sanctions against you though. They gonna keep on rocking. And the Slavs and the Mongols, right? That's what we will have to be worried about in a minute, because these Western Europeans, they going out. So when you look at the geopolitical fight, the fall of the USSR, the resurgence of Russian nationalism, and this fight in this line, if you look at the map, Ukraine is the last country before you get to Germany and all the rest of that. And speaking of Germany, you go into the geopolitical politics of this. I'm gonna school y'all this evening. Google a man named Stepan Bandera. Stepan Bandera. Stepan Bandera was a Ukrainian nationalist who wanted independence for that geographical area, that particular sect of Slavs there, away from Russia and Poland, because you had to study Poland, the Polish, that was the whole another empire there, the Cossacks. You got to study these different European tribes, right? And so Bandera, because he wanted Ukraine to be independent when the Nazis invaded, he helped Hitler against Russia, right? So the people who are running Ukraine now hold Stepan Bandera in very high regard. And the street tribes of the Euros in Ukraine are Nazis. They're neo-Nazis. They're coming from the United States, coming from Canada, coming from all over Europe. And as African people, we have to understand what that means to us. But because we be slow sometimes, like, oh man, that's just white people fighting now. Oh man, Putin wrong for going in there. It's just stupid. It's dumb. Just don't study history. I was talking about Mukasa, and he was up in arms like I am. It's just impossible to look at the historical trajectory of the African liberation movements and see who has been allied and who has been against. To see who has at period of time provided arms and see who was carrying out the slaughter. How do we get that kind of cognitive dissonance? That kind of Stockholm syndrome. Because we the best dressed up slaves in the world and we're comfortable. Really inside, I feel like we just don't want to say it because we know who's listening. Or either that we're just not studying. Because when you understand what is happening on the ground now, our people are in danger in Ukraine, and I'm sure that there'll come out to be reports of violence against African people there by these particular neo-Nazis who run the government in Ukraine, that Hitler, from his last report, was quoted as saying, that's what he said, you got to get rid of the drug abusers and the neo-Nazis out of there. And when you come to the head of a government that lost the patriotic war against Nazis, right, it puts a whole nother perspective on the way that you're looking at this thing. It's like us in the Congo against the Belgians, You know, 28 million, the siege of Stalingrad. You have to study history. You have to know what occurred between those people and that conflict in the history of it. So Kiev is the spiritual homeland of the Rus. Putin wants it back. How does that affect African people? Well, from off the top, the reports are coming in from authorities around the world, even BBC reporting that African students trying to leave for their safety, and bordering countries are not being allowed to leave by police, and not only the neo-Nazis, but that by the official government of Ukraine. There are police getting on boarding trains and pulling African people, Black African students, particularly from West and North Africa, off of them so that white people can be evacuated first. So video footage shows that the Ukrainian people and police boarded these trains and forcibly removed all Africans and allowing all other nationals to proceed. This is how far down the ladder we are regarded in the world. And even the BBC, who of course is no friend of anybody of us, for those who think they are, reported this. This proves what President Putin was been saying all along, that Ukraine is being run by neo-Nazis. Been saying that for years. If you go on YouTube and Google neo-Nazis in Ukraine, you'll see reports going back 3, 5, 7 years, all the way back to the revolution in 2014, when the democratically elected president of Ukraine was run out by these white nationalists, voted out by the parliament, and forced to leave the city. These were during the so-called Maidan protests, which culminated in the removal of this democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych. The neo-Nazis openly campaigned their symbols on the streets of Kiev, and guess who was there with them? Your good old Vietnam war hero, John McCain, over there passing out sandwiches and, helping out the neo-Nazis over there in Ukraine. Imperialism run deep. And the main vein of it is the United States, and the neo-Nazis are their shock troops around the world. They are their private contractors. They are ISIS. We've studied this. You get the images. You're able to blow them up. You see the tattoos on their wrists and arms and wherever they're exposed at. You see it. Well, it comes as no surprise that the same Ukrainians who are crying and chanting democracy today are very racist. You got to understand who these people are. I told you about Bandera just a minute ago, right? So, indeed, the majority of these people are descendants of the Nazis who fled from Austria and Germany during the Second World War and settled in Ukraine. They are Nazis. Man, you got to study the ethnicity, the ethnography of these people. They are neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They're trying to wrestle that as Germanic people, the war that Hitler said, the Lebensraum, the expansion of the territory of the neo-Nazi, the nationalists. They even call themselves the National Socialist Party. Think about that. Think about that. The National Socialist Party. They're calling themselves socialists. But they're Nazis, right? That's the name of Hitler's party. You got to go into the geopolitics of it and understand these nuances of statesmanship, statehood, statecraft, political organization on the state level, right? So indeed, the majority of them are descendants of the Nazis who fled from Austria. Racism is in their genes. What boggles the mind is that many Africans, right, in the diaspora and within Africa, the first people to condemn President Putin of being a ruthless dictator and warmonger. They ignore the fact that he's fighting against NATO expansionism, which poses an existential threat to his country. And today, the Anglo-Saxons are putting in place sanctions regimes to punish Russia, and President Putin pretending as if he alone is responsible for the current crisis, right? As usual, they lament the fact that democracy is in danger in Europe. Mm-hmm. When the reality is, they don't even care about no democracy. You know, if they did, they'd support the cries of the Palestinians with the so-called democracy at stake, with daily killings of children, old people, and demolition of people's houses. So that's like ain't even connected to what it is that we're, the rest of the fight around the world, not to do with African people. There's no humanity with that. Where was Libya during this? How many countries have the United States bombed and blew out? Libya, Iraq, tried to take over Syria. If it wasn't for the Russians, that would have been happening. And now in Yemen. It's a shame for Africans to blindly support the doomed adventures of these Western imperialists wherever they happen, because blacks will never be invited to their dinner table. When it comes to summertime, Africans will always be sidelined. African leaders should be careful before condemning what they don't know well. You have to study, you have to know this history. Ukraine's contemptuous treatment of black Africans is totally unacceptable and must be condemned by all Africans. That should be a mandate. Do our people not have the right to flee from Russian bombs and save their lives? Can we not live? This is raw racism and it's definitely evil. Even when they're fighting and people are dying, the Europeans still deny some people access to their borders simply because of their skin color. How wicked can they be? The African Union should carefully weigh the evidence before condemning Putin's actions in Ukraine. They should look at this. The EU should condemn the Ukrainian neo-Nazis to stop treating black Africans as subhuman. Africans stuck in Ukraine should be allowed, like others, to evacuate to places of safety. This should be a mandate from all African nations. Above any defense of European countries or Ukraine or any government, your people should come first. The conflict will blow back on Africa in certain ways. If you studied the news lately, there's a group called the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is the private contractors that were hired by the country of Mali. As Mali was putting out France out of their country, that's been a centuries-old oppressor and colonizer. They called them these Russian guys, the Wagner Group. And so I won't go into a long treatise, and I'm so proud of myself that I didn't, on socialism and how Africans should understand that the historical trajectory politically of our history is more aligned with that political focus than Western imperialism and capitalism. No, I don't support the government of Russia 1,000%. No, I don't abstain to the tenets of it in regards to Marx and Lenin. It is scientific socialism that went from there, that was already in existence and that has been redefined, redesigned, and fit for the African revolutionary struggle. But in conclusion, I'll leave you with the words of the great Fidel Castro. And he says, anti-communism and anti-socialism were the main banners. They were weapons to try to preserve the capitalist system intact and try to keep the people divided. It was necessary to wage a great battle against these reactionary ideas, against that lack of awareness, because the people wanted changes, but they did not have the clear idea of what changes were needed. The people were against injustice, against hunger, against unemployment, against intolerable poverty affecting most of the people. But they did not yet fully understand that those problems stem from the capitalist system. From private ownership of the means of production, from a system that by nature is exploitative, from a system that by nature is wholly unconcerned about the people's problems and only cares about the profits of the insatiable capitalist class. That's the system. And that's what they're fighting. And when you get a chance to understand the historical trajectory, and as an African statesman, and truly get into the study of the history of these nations to know what now contemporarily in this day and time, what is happening. Not then we make the wrong decisions, we pick the wrong friends. Oh, we do it too late. We get in, take Patrice Lumumba, for instance. He said he didn't want the CIA to kill him if he went to the Russians at first. But then when he got desperate, he saw he wasn't nothing else to do. Then he tried it, but it was too late. The Belgians had already done put in place the airborne paratrooper. Hey, it's politics. It's dirty. It's nasty. But if you make the right decision, you study well, then, hey, maybe you'll be that next revolutionary leader, understanding the history and putting yourself in position to lead your people towards this ultimate victory that we must see as a nation, as a race, and as a continent. This has been your combat reporter, Brother Tugmo Sukar here on Al Kibalan News. And remember, as always, African people, stay vigilant and stay on the live. If we have any comments, or do you have anything, Comrade Bourne? Okay, then. So, once again, look at and study. Get a copy of this here, In Defense of Socialism by Fidel. Awesome. And I also had this is another great study here. The reporter, Nick Terse. I email with Nick now and then. This volume is called Tomorrow's Battlefield, U.S. Proxy Wars and Secret Operations in Africa. When you look at this, you understand that what is happening in Ukraine is going to affect Africa. Not only is it affecting it already with our people trying to get out, but if these people, these white nationalists, these Nazis are the same, they are the shock troops of Western imperialism. These are the ones, they dress them up like they Arabs or something and call them ISIS, and they send them into Libya or send them into Central Africa, just throw them out the airplane and they just kill whatever they see, you know? So they're suppressed in, do you understand? Neo-Nazism is the supreme enemy, right, of people of the world. If they're crushed in Ukraine, then they can't expand out to other places. You know, you got to pick and know what it is that the Russians did to you, where the Russian slave ship was. And, you know, Russia has 21 international bases outside of the Russian territory. The United States got 800. You know what I mean? It's like you have to make the right decision geopolitically in regards to statesmanship and statehood and statecraft and running a nation. We can do it. We just have to take that study seriously and make I take time, take days, of course, be in my position, working for the African Union. I'm able to have discourse with people on the international level, often comrades in solidarity with the African revolutionary struggle, Cuba, Venezuela, many places, North Korea, through its permanent mission at the UN in New York. They don't have any embassies over here, but the North Koreans got a permanent mission in New York. You go there, knock on the door, and holler at Kim and them, you know? It's statehood, it's statecraft. That's what I'm saying. We have to understand. We have to have a plebiscite. We have to look at the expansion of the Black liberation struggle to the continent as a people, as a diaspora nation, us, right? Going home in solidarity, re-immersing ourselves in our nations and cultures that we came from, and then bringing this geopolitical focus along with engineering and development and education and training. And then this thing will be over with in the morning. It's like you don't even take them like about 10 years to do that. Like for real, if you're doing it for real. Look at Sankara and the revolution from Sankara and them was like 4 years, right? And I got one of my volumes here. We are the heirs of the world's revolutions. And we are the heirs of the world's revolutions. We are an African people on the path to liberation. So we do have a concern in Ukraine and in Russia. And we have to make a decision. You gonna roll with some neo-Nazis who ain't in a country they ain't never had no relationship with Africa one way or the other? But you see what they do to regular citizens